Marcus Webb drove his old pickup truck down a dirt road that hadn't been used in years. Branches scratched the sides of his truck, and leaves slapped against the windshield. His phone had lost signal 20 minutes ago, but he didn't care. He wasn't looking for a specific place. He was looking for anywhere far away from his old life. He was 42 years old, with rough, calloused hands and grey hair at his temples. Everything he owned was packed in the back of his truck under a blue tarp. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The road ended suddenly where the forest got too thick to drive through anymore. Marcus stopped the truck and got out. He pushed through bushes and undergrowth until he found a clearing about 30 yards across. An old tree had fallen years ago and created a gap in the thick canopy of branches above. Sunlight poured down into the space, and ferns covered the ground in bright green waves. Marcus stood in the middle of the clearing and turned in a slow circle, measuring everything with his eyes. This was perfect. This was exactly what he needed. "You planning to camp here or something?" Marcus spun around. A big man stood at the edge of the clearing, maybe 6 feet tall with broad shoulders. He wore jeans, a flannel shirt with rolled-up sleeves, and a baseball cap. He held a walking stick and looked like he owned the place. "I'm going to build here," Marcus said quietly. "Build what?" the man asked. "A house." The man stared at Marcus for a second, then threw his head back and laughed. He laughed so hard he had to bend over and hold his knees. The sound echoed through the trees and scared away birds. "A house!" the man gasped between laughs. "You're going to build a house out here, in the middle of nowhere?" He wiped tears from his eyes. "Oh, man, that's the funniest thing I've heard in months." Marcus just watched him laugh and said nothing. Finally the man straightened up, still chuckling. Sorry. It's just, look at you. No offense, but you look like some office worker who watched a YouTube video and thinks he can build a house in the woods." "Something like that," Marcus said. The man shook his head and grinned. "This I have to see. Name's Dale Kowalski. I've got a hunting cabin about a mile from here. Been coming to these woods for 15 years. I built my cabin myself, and I actually knew what I was doing." "Good for you," Marcus said. Dale's grin got wider. "You have any idea what you're getting into? This isn't some backyard project. This is real wilderness. No power lines, no running water, no roads except that old logging track, and it washes out every spring." "I know," Marcus said. "Do you really?" Dale stepped closer and looked Marcus up and down. "What's your plan? Where's your foundation going? Where are you getting lumber? What about permits?" "I'll figure it out," Marcus interrupted. Dale laughed again. "You'll figure it out. Right. Tell you what, I'll check back in a week. When you're still sitting in your truck eating canned beans and trying to figure out which end of a hammer to hold, maybe you'll be ready to listen to someone who knows what he's talking about." "Maybe," Marcus said. Dale looked at him for a long moment, like he was trying to decide if Marcus was serious or just stubborn. Finally, he shook his head. "Your funeral, friend. Don't say I didn't warn you." He turned and walked back into the forest. Marcus watched him disappear into the trees. When the footsteps faded completely, Marcus turned back to the clearing and smiled slightly. Let him laugh. Let him think whatever he wanted. Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. Marcus spent the first whole day just walking around the clearing. He paced it off in every direction, counting his steps. He dug little test holes with a folding shovel to check the soil. He looked at how the ground sloped slightly downward toward the north. He watched where the sun moved across the sky and marked positions with sticks. He studied where rainwater would naturally flow. By evening, he had a complete picture in his mind of exactly where his house would sit. The next morning, Marcus started clearing. He didn't clear the whole area, just a specific rectangle where his house would stand. He worked slowly and carefully, using a machete to cut down small trees and a saw for bigger ones. Every movement was deliberate. He didn't waste energy. By the third day, he had cleared a rectangle 20 feet by 30 feet. The long side ran east to west, so the house would get maximum sunlight from the south. The ground was level and cleared down to bare dirt. That's when Dale showed up again. "Still here, huh?" Dale stood at the edge of the clearing with his hands on his hips. "I figured you'd have given up by now." Marcus didn't look up from the hole he was digging. "Not given up." Dale walked closer and examined the cleared rectangle. His face showed he was skeptical. "What's this supposed to be?" "The footprint," Marcus said. "The footprint," Dale repeated. "Okay. And where's your foundation? Please don't tell me you're just going to set logs on the ground. They'll rot in a year." Marcus straightened up and wiped sweat from his forehead. "I'm setting pier blocks, 1 at each corner and 3 along each long side. 11 total." Dale blinked. "Pier blocks? Where are you getting pier blocks out here?" "Making them." "Making them," Dale said flatly. "You're going to make concrete pier blocks in the middle of the forest." "With what exactly?" Marcus pointed to his truck. "I've got 20 bags of concrete mix, forms to shape them, rebar to reinforce them, a level and measuring tools." Dale walked over to the truck and pulled back the tarp. Sure enough, bags of concrete were stacked neatly in the truck bed, along with lumber for forms, pieces of rebar, and various tools. Dale's expression changed slightly. He looked surprised. "You actually planned this out?" Dale said. "I did." "It still won't work," Dale said. "But," he sounded less certain now, "concrete's heavy. How are you going to get level piers without heavy equipment?" Marcus smiled, the same way people did it for 1,000 years, carefully. Over the next week, Marcus dug holes for his pier blocks. Each hole was exactly 18 inches deep. He used a post hole digger for the first few inches, then a shovel to make them wider. He checked each hole with a level to make sure the bottoms were perfectly flat and at the right height compared to each other. Dale stopped by every couple of days. He always had some comment about how it wouldn't work or how Marcus was wasting his time. But Marcus noticed Dale stayed longer each time and watched more carefully. "You're checking for frost line?" Dale asked on the 5th day. 18 inches should be enough," Marcus replied. "The ground doesn't freeze that deep here. I checked historical weather data." "What about drainage?" "Gravel base in each hole, 6 inches of gravel. Water drains through it." Dale grunted. "And the slope of the ground?" "Accounted for. The piers on the east side will be slightly taller to level everything out." By the 10th day, Marcus was ready to pour concrete. He built square forms for each pier using scrap lumber. Each form was carefully measured to create blocks 12 inches on each side. He put rebar in each hole for reinforcement. He mixed concrete in a wheelbarrow, 1 bag at a time, adding water from jugs he'd brought. Dale arrived in the middle of this work. "You're hand-mixing concrete," Dale said. "That's insane." Marcus poured concrete mixture into a form and tapped the sides to get rid of air bubbles. "It's therapeutic. It's going to take forever. I've got time." Dale watched him work for almost an hour, without saying anything. When Marcus finished the fourth pier, Dale finally spoke. "They're level," he said grudgingly. "I checked with my eye. They're actually level with each other." Marcus nodded. "They are." "Beginner's luck," Dale muttered, but he didn't sound like he believed it. A week later, the concrete had hardened completely. Marcus placed thick wooden beams across the pier blocks, creating a level platform to support his house. The beams were 6 inches by 6 inches and pressure-treated to resist rot. Marcus spent an entire day positioning them perfectly, checking and double-checking with his level. "Where'd you get pressure-treated lumber?" Dale asked. He'd stopped announcing himself now. He just showed up. "A sawmill 40 miles down the mountain," Marcus said. "Had them delivered to the end of the logging road. I carried them in one at a time." Dale looked at the beams. Each one was 16 feet long and weighed at least 100 pounds. "You carried these by yourself?" "I did." "Why not just use local timber? That's what I did for my cabin." "Local timber works fine for walls and the roof," Marcus explained. "But for the foundation and the parts touching the ground, you want pressure treated. It prevents rot and keeps insects away." Dale scratched his chin. "Huh, I guess that makes sense." The next part was building the walls, and this was where Marcus's real plan showed itself. Dale had assumed Marcus would frame walls with regular lumber like 2x4s and plywood. Instead, Marcus headed into the forest with a chainsaw. "What are you doing?" Dale called after him. "Getting logs." Marcus spent the next 3 days walking through the forest, looking at trees. He examined dozens of trees before marking one with chalk. The trees he chose were all dead standing timber. These were trees that had died, but remained standing upright. Their wood was already dried and hardened. "Dead trees," Dale said when he figured out the pattern. "Why dead trees?" "They're already seasoned," Marcus explained. "Fresh-cut wood, what we call green wood, will shrink and warp as it dries out. Dead standing timber is stable. It won't twist or crack later. But it's harder to work with. Harder to cut, yes, but easier to build with long term. The trade-off is worth it." Marcus also chose very carefully for straightness. Every tree he marked was remarkably straight, with very little taper from bottom to top. He cut them into 12-foot lengths and stripped off the bark with a draw knife, working in the evenings by firelight. Dale watched this process with growing fascination. "You're building a log cabin," he said. "An actual old-fashioned log cabin." "I am. Nobody builds log cabins by hand anymore. It's too much work." Marcus kept working the draw knife, with long curls of bark falling away from the log. "I've got time." "You keep saying that. What are you running from anyway?" Marcus paused with the draw knife still against the log. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Finally he said, "The same things everyone runs from. Bad choices, bad luck, a life that stopped making sense." Dale nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Building the walls was the hardest physical work. Each log had to be lifted, positioned, and secured. Marcus used a technique where each log was carefully shaped to fit perfectly against the log below it, creating a tight seal without needing any filler material. This required incredible precision. Marcus would test fit a log, mark where it needed to be changed, take it down, carve or sand the needed change, and test fit it again. Sometimes this process repeated 5 or 6 times for a single log. Dale watched this with something like awe. "I just stacked my logs and filled the gaps with cement," Dale admitted. "This is actual craftsmanship. "It's the right way," Marcus said simply. As the walls got higher, Dale started showing up earlier in the morning and staying later in the evening. At first, he just watched. Then he started asking questions about technique and process. Then one morning he showed up carrying tools. "Need some help?" Dale asked. Marcus looked at him. "You offering?" "You're doing this the hard way," Dale said. "Might as well have an extra pair of hands." Marcus smiled. "Could use help on the next log. It's a 2-man lift." They worked together that whole day, and the next day, and the day after that. Dale was surprised by how much Marcus knew, and how every decision Marcus made was thought through completely. When Dale suggested shortcuts, Marcus would explain why they wouldn't work in the long run. "You're not just building a house," Dale said, after the 4th wall log was in place. "You're building a structure that'll last decades or longer." "That's the idea," Marcus said. "Where'd you learn all this?" Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans. "My grandfather. He was a timber framer. He built barns and houses the old way, all by hand, with traditional joints and techniques. He started teaching me when I was 8 years old." "Why didn't you mention this before?" Marcus shrugged. "You didn't ask. You just assumed I didn't know what I was doing." Dale had the grace to look embarrassed. "Yeah, I did assume that. I'm sorry." "It's fine. People make assumptions all the time." "So what happened? Why aren't you building houses professionally?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I did for a while. After my grandfather died, I worked in construction doing framing work. Then I got married, had a daughter, and needed steady income with benefits. I went into office work doing project management. I spent 15 years behind a desk managing other people building things." He picked up his water bottle and took a long drink. "Then my wife left and took my daughter with her. The office job started feeling like a prison. One day I just couldn't do it anymore. I sold everything, bought this truck and supplies, and drove until I found somewhere quiet." Dale nodded slowly. "And you came out here to build the house you never got to build before?" "Something like that." They worked in comfortable silence after that. The walls rose steadily, one log at a time. Marcus taught Dale the precise fitting technique, and Dale proved to be a quick learner. By the end of the 2nd week of wall building, they had developed a smooth rhythm working together. Not everything went smoothly. On a cold morning in the 3rd week, they ran into a problem. One of the wall logs had a hidden crack that only showed itself when they tried to fit it into place. The crack ran lengthwise for almost 3 feet, making the log structurally weak. "We could use it anyway," Dale suggested. "Fill the crack with epoxy or something." Marcus shook his head. "Won't hold up under weight. The crack will grow over time." "So what do we do?" "Cut a new log." Dale groaned. "That'll take 2 days at least." "Can't be helped. The foundation has to be solid, or nothing else matters." As Marcus headed into the forest with his chainsaw, Dale called after him, "You know, a normal person would just use the cracked log and hope for the best." "I'm not building a normal house," Marcus called back. Dale stood there for a moment, then smiled and shook his head. He was starting to understand how Marcus thought. This wasn't about speed or taking shortcuts. It was about doing things right, no matter how long it took. The new log took 3 days to prepare. 1 day to find the right tree. 1 day to cut it and haul it back to the clearing. 1 day to strip the bark and shape it. But when they finally fitted it into place, it was absolutely perfect. "Worth the wait," Dale admitted. Other challenges came up. A windstorm knocked over a tree that barely missed the partially built structure. They had to spend a full day cutting it up and moving the pieces. Then came 3 days of heavy rain that turned the clearing into mud and made work impossible. Marcus used the time to carve notches and prepare joints inside his tent. Dale used it to go home and think about what they were doing. When Dale returned after the rain stopped, he brought someone with him. "This is my son," Dale said. "Jake. He's 17. I've been telling him about what you're doing out here." Jake was tall and thin, with his father's broad shoulders just starting to fill out. He looked around the clearing with wide eyes at the partially built log structure. "Dad said you're building a log cabin by hand," Jake said. "Like, actually by hand without power tools or anything." I didn't believe him. Marcus smiled. "It's true. Can I help?" Marcus looked at Dale, who nodded. "School's out for summer. The kid needs to learn what real work looks like instead of staring at his phone all day." Jake rolled his eyes but didn't argue. "All right," Marcus said to Jake. "You ever use hand tools before?" "A little bit." "Then let's start with the basics and see how you do." By midsummer, the walls were complete. 4 walls of carefully fitted logs stood 8 feet tall, creating a solid rectangle. The doorway and window openings had been cut with precision and framed with additional timbers for support. Now came the roof. "This is where most people mess up," Marcus explained to Dale and Jake. "A roof has to do 3 things. Support weight, including heavy snow in winter, shed water effectively, and have enough pitch, enough angle for proper drainage." "What pitch are you planning?" Dale asked. 6-12. That means 6 inches of rise for every 12 inches of horizontal run. That's pretty steep. It needs to be. Snow load out here can hit 50 pounds per square foot in a bad winter. The roof has to handle that without collapsing. They began with the ridge beam and rafters. Marcus had pre-cut these from more dead-standing timber, carefully calculating all the angles and lengths beforehand. The ridge beam was a massive piece of Douglas fir, 12 inches in diameter and 22 feet long. Getting it up to the top of the walls required all 3 of them, plus a system of ropes and pulleys that Marcus rigged up. "It's like watching a medieval castle being built," Jake said, grunting as they all hauled on the ropes together. "Pretty much the same techniques they used back then," Marcus replied. The ridge beam settled into place with a satisfying solid thunk. Marcus secured it with mortise and tenon joints he'd carved into the top wall logs. These were precisely cut interlocking pieces that fit together like puzzle pieces. Dale inspected the joints closely and whistled in appreciation. "Those joints are perfect," he said, "like fine furniture joinery. My grandfather used to say, 'Measure twice, cut once, curse never,'" Marcus said. "Words to live by." The rafters went up next, 1 pair at a time. Each rafter was notched to sit perfectly on the top wall log and meet its matching partner at the ridge beam. Marcus cut what's called a bird's mouth notch in each rafter. This is a specific angled cut that lets the rafter rest securely on the wall log without sliding off. Jake watched this process with fascination. "How do you know exactly where to cut?" "Geometry," Marcus said. "Pythagorean theorem, mostly. The same math you're learning in school." "School makes it seem totally useless," Jake said. "This makes it actually make sense." Dale smiled at that. "Maybe you'll pay more attention in class next year." "Maybe," Jake said, but he was smiling too. With the rafter system complete, they began adding decking. These were 1 inch by 6 inch boards laid perpendicular across the rafters. This was where having extra hands made the work go much faster. Marcus, Dale, and Jake developed an efficient system. Marcus measured and cut each board. Dale positioned it. Jake nailed it down. "How many nails do you think we've used total?" Jake asked one afternoon. 5,000, maybe 6,000, Dale guessed. 8,742, Marcus said without even looking up from his work. Dale and Jake both stared at him in surprise. "You've been counting every single nail?" Dale asked. "Always count your fasteners. Lets you know exactly how many you have left and when you need more." Jake laughed. "You're kinda weird, Marcus." "I know," Marcus said with a smile. With the roof fully decked, Marcus began applying the waterproof layer. He used rolled roofing material, which wasn't the prettiest option, but was practical and very effective. Over this, he planned to add split cedar shakes, which he would make himself from cedar logs. "You're going to split your own roof shakes?" Dale asked in disbelief. "Do you have any idea how long that takes?" "A few weeks, probably." "A few?" Dale stopped himself and shook his head. "Of course you're going to make your own shakes. Why would you ever do anything the easy way?" But when Marcus started making the shakes, they were genuinely beautiful. He used straight-grained cedar logs and split them with a tool called a froe and a wooden mallet. This created thin wooden shingles about 18 inches long that would last for decades. Each shake varied slightly in width, which would give the finished roof a natural, organic appearance. Jake helped with this process and learned the rhythm of striking the froe to split the cedar cleanly. "This is actually kind of fun," he admitted after making his first perfect shake. "It is," Marcus agreed. "There's something deeply satisfying about making useful things with your own hands." Meanwhile, Dale worked on building the door and window frames, following Marcus's careful measurements exactly. The door would be made from planks Marcus had been collecting and preparing, held together with wooden pegs, rather than metal screws or nails. "Why wooden pegs instead of screws?" Dale asked. "Wooden pegs won't rust or corrode," Marcus explained, "and they allow the wood to expand and contract slightly as temperature and humidity change with the seasons. Metal hardware is completely rigid. That rigidity can actually cause the wood to split over time." "You've literally thought of everything," Dale said with genuine admiration. "I try to." As August arrived, the house began to look genuinely complete from the outside. The log walls glowed a beautiful golden color in the afternoon sun. The roof, now covered with reddish-brown cedar shakes, looked like something from a magazine. The door hung perfectly straight and true. The windows, which Marcus had salvaged from a building demolition site and carefully fitted, reflected the surrounding forest beautifully. Dale stood in the clearing one evening, just looking at what they'd built together. He shook his head in wonder. "I can't believe it," he said quietly. "When you first showed up here, I honestly thought you were crazy. Some city guy playing pretend lumberjack in the woods who'd be gone in a week." "I know you did," Marcus said. "I was completely wrong. This is—" Dale gestured at the house, struggling for words. "This is incredible. This is better than anything I could have built, and I've been doing this stuff for years." "You helped build it," Marcus pointed out. "This wouldn't exist without your help. You designed it. You knew what you were doing from day one, even when I was laughing at you." Marcus smiled. "I appreciate you saying that." Jake came walking up from the forest, carrying an armload of firewood they'd been splitting and stacking. "Dad, We should tear down our cabin and build a new one like this. Ours is kind of crappy compared to what Marcus built." Dale laughed. "Yeah, it really is, isn't it?" While the exterior was finished, the interior still needed a lot of work. Marcus built everything by hand: shelves, a bed frame, a table, chairs. He used more of the carefully selected wood, joining pieces with traditional carpentry joints rather than screws or nails wherever possible. "You're making museum-quality furniture," Dale observed one day, watching Marcus cut dovetail joints for a drawer. These were precise, interlocking triangular cuts that held wood together without any fasteners. "It's not that complicated once you understand the geometry," Marcus said. "It just takes patience and attention to detail. That's exactly what makes it museum quality. Nobody has that kind of patience anymore." The floor was made from flat stones Marcus collected from a creek bed about half a mile away. He spent several weeks selecting stones of the right size and shape, carrying them back to the clearing, and fitting them together like a giant jigsaw puzzle. The result was a beautiful flagstone floor that would never wear out and would stay naturally cool in summer. "That floor must weigh 3 tons at least," Dale said. "Probably closer to 4 tons, actually," Marcus agreed. "But the pier foundation can easily handle it. That's why I overbuilt the foundation to begin with." For the interior walls, Marcus left the logs exposed, but sanded them until they were completely smooth. He applied linseed oil to bring out the natural wood grain and protect against insects. The scent of linseed oil mixed with cedar filled the house with a clean, natural smell that made you want to breathe deeply. Jake helped Marcus build a chimney using stones mortared together. The chimney rose up through the roof, adding another 4 feet to the structure's height. Marcus designed a simple but very efficient firebox that would radiate heat throughout the entire space. "Won't you need a stove or something for cooking?" Jake asked. "For cooking, yes. I'll eventually get a wood-burning stove," Marcus said. "But this fireplace will handle all the heating needs. The house is naturally well insulated because of the thick log walls, and it's not that big inside. This fireplace will be more than enough to keep it warm, even in the coldest winter." By September, as the days grew shorter and the nights got cooler, the house was functionally complete. Marcus had built an entire home from scratch, using mostly materials from the surrounding forest, with tools and techniques that would have been completely recognizable to builders 100 years ago. The house stood solid and perfectly fitted to its environment. It looked almost as if it had grown there naturally, rather than being constructed by human hands. Dale absolutely insisted on having a celebration when the house was finished. He brought his wife Anne, and Jake invited several friends from town. Someone brought a guitar. Someone else brought beer and food for a cookout. They built a bonfire in the clearing, and as evening fell, people gathered around it. Marcus felt awkward at first. He wasn't used to being around groups of people anymore. He wasn't comfortable being the center of attention. But Dale kept making toasts and kept telling everyone the story of how he'd laughed at Marcus on that very first day. He kept pointing out all the small details of the house that showed real craftsmanship and skill. "Here's to Marcus," Dale said, raising his beer bottle. Who knew exactly what the hell he was doing, even when the rest of us thought he was completely crazy? Everyone drank to that and cheered. Dale's wife Anne pulled Marcus aside at one point during the evening. "Dale's been completely different since he met you," she said. "He's happier, more engaged with life. He was getting restless and bored with his routine, I think. Helping you with this project gave him something meaningful to do with his time and skills. He helped me just as much as I helped him, Marcus said honestly. Maybe that's exactly how it's supposed to work between people, Anne said with a smile. Later in the evening, Jake approached Marcus with several of his teenage friends. "Would you be willing to teach us," Jake asked, "how to build things the way you do, using traditional methods?" Marcus looked at the young faces, all eager and genuinely interested. "Sure," he said. "Come by any time you want. There's still plenty more work to do around here, and I can always use help." As the party wound down and people started heading back to their cars and trucks, Dale lingered behind. He and Marcus stood together by the dying fire, looking at the house illuminated by pale moonlight filtering through the trees. "You actually did it," Dale said simply. "We did it," Marcus corrected him. "I couldn't have finished it alone. I never thought I'd actually see someone do this in real life. Build a real, proper house by hand from scratch, using traditional methods. I honestly thought those days were completely gone." "They're only gone if we let them be gone," Marcus said. Dale nodded slowly. "Are you planning to stay here long term? Or was this just a project, and now you'll move on to something else?" Marcus looked at the house, at the dark forest surrounding the clearing, at the ferns now turning brown as autumn approached. He thought about the months of work, the deep satisfaction of each perfect joint, the way his hands had remembered skills his grandfather had taught him decades ago. "I'm staying," he said with certainty. "Good," Dale said. "It'll be nice having a neighbor who actually knows what he's doing." They both laughed at that. The first snow came in late October. Marcus woke to profound silence, that particular muffled quiet that only exists after fresh snowfall. He got up, added wood to the fireplace, and opened his door to see the clearing completely transformed into a winter wonderland. The house performed absolutely perfectly. The steep roof shed snow without any dangerous build-up. The thick log walls kept the interior comfortably warm even on the coldest nights. The stone floor absorbed heat from the fireplace during the day and released it slowly all night, maintaining a steady, comfortable temperature. Dale visited regularly throughout the winter, often bringing supplies and always bringing good conversation. He frequently brought Jake along, who was becoming increasingly interested in traditional building techniques and craftsmanship. Marcus showed them both how to carve wooden bowls, how to make rope from tree bark, how to build furniture without using any metal fasteners at all. "You're like a time traveler," Jake said one snowy afternoon while working on a carving project, "teaching us stuff that people knew 100 years ago, but everyone's forgotten now." "People haven't forgotten," Marcus said thoughtfully. "They just got convinced they didn't need to know these things anymore. But this knowledge, how to build things and make things and be truly self-sufficient, it's always valuable. Maybe now more than ever, actually." In January, a massive storm dropped 3 feet of snow in just 2 days. The old logging road became completely impassable. Marcus was totally cut off from the outside world for more than a week, but he was absolutely fine. He had plenty of firewood stacked in a covered shed he'd built. He had food stored properly. He had everything he needed to be comfortable and safe. When Dale finally managed to snowshoe in after the road was somewhat cleared, he found Marcus calmly carving furniture by the warm fireplace. "You weren't worried at all?" Dale asked, surprised. "Worried about what?" "Being completely trapped out here alone." Marcus smiled. "This isn't being trapped, Dale. This is actually living." When spring finally arrived and the snow melted away, Marcus began several new projects. He built a chicken coop, using the same careful techniques he'd used on the house. He started a vegetable garden in a sunny spot he'd been preparing. He constructed a root cellar dug into a hillside for storing food. People started coming by to see the house, friends of Dale's, people Jake had told about the incredible house built by hand, even a few journalists who'd heard about the man building a home using century-old techniques. Marcus didn't seek out attention, but he didn't turn curious people away either. He showed them the house, explained his building techniques, and patiently answered questions. Several people asked if he would consider teaching classes or workshops about traditional building methods. Marcus thought about it for a while, then agreed. Soon, he had regular groups of people coming out to his clearing to learn timber framing, log building, and traditional joinery techniques. "You're basically starting a school out here," Dale observed one day, as a group of students practiced cutting mortise and tenon joints. "I guess I am," Marcus said. "I didn't plan it that way initially, but it feels right. My grandfather taught me these skills. Now I'm teaching others. The knowledge keeps moving forward to new generations." Jake became Marcus's unofficial teaching assistant, helping instruct people on basic techniques while learning increasingly advanced ones himself. By the following summer, Jake could cut clean dovetail joints and fully understood the mathematics of roof framing. "I think I want to do this for real," Jake told Marcus one day. "Maybe study architecture in college, but focus on traditional building methods and sustainable construction. Someone needs to keep this knowledge alive." "You'd be really good at that," Marcus said sincerely. Dale overheard this conversation and pulled Marcus aside later. "Thank you," he said quietly. "My son was drifting through life with no real direction or purpose. You gave him both of those things." "He did the work himself," Marcus said. "He put in the effort to learn." "You showed him what was actually possible," Dale said. "That matters more than you know." On the anniversary of the day Marcus first drove his truck down that overgrown logging road, he sat on the porch he'd recently added to the house. He watched the sun set through the trees, painting the sky orange and pink. The house had weathered a complete year of all 4 seasons. The logs had settled slightly, making all the joints even tighter. The cedar shakes had darkened to a rich brown color. The stone floor had developed a beautiful patina from daily use. It was exactly what Marcus had imagined when he first stood in this clearing, but somehow even better.